Well, it turned out that all those rumors and the one big leak are actually all true. Sony has officially unveiled their revision of the PS5, a new version of the system that'll be coming out this holiday season that will be replacing the current model with a bunch of interesting modifications and changes, some of which I really like and some of which I'm a little more perplexed by. Now, they've already put up a blog post explaining a lot of stuff. There's a couple things that haven't been covered yet that I am curious about that hopefully we'll learn about soon, but I want to go over all the changes and things that we've seen about the system, because it is interesting how much of a revision it is in different directions. Real quick, by the way, in general, PlayStation is just doing a lot hardware-wise this year. We already got the PSVR 2. They are releasing the PlayStation Portal. There's this new Revised system. There's new headsets. I am planning on covering pretty much all of that. So if you want to make sure you see that, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon so you don't miss out. First things first, this is technically not a slim revision. PlayStation themselves are not using this term at all. People tend to focus on the idea of mid-cycle refreshes being slims or smaller additions in some way, which this one is, just not by a gigantic amount. It's a little shorter, a little thinner, a little less deep. It's smaller in every dimension, but not by a very large margin to where, especially when you just see it in photos without a previous edition model for scale, it looks more or less the same size. But it is actually a little smaller and lighter as well. The most noticeable immediate change about it, however, is of course the big rumor we heard a long time about the disk drive being detachable. With the current versions of the PS5 all digital and disc editions, those are set models. There is no way to change your system from one or the other. What you buy is what you get. In the case of this system, however, it's being marketed in a way where effectively both models are the same system. It's just whether or not it comes bundled with a disc reader. Now, this is also impacting the pricing and general approach to the system. PlayStation is still selling them each as their own bundles, with the digital now being $450 and the disc option maintaining the same price as $500. If you want to get the disc reader separately, that's going to cost $80. So it does cost you a little bit more in the long run to go digital and upgrade later. But if you did want to break up that cost for some reason, or you're just getting digital first and disc is something you're interested in later, that is going to be an option, which is nice compared to having to buy a brand new whole system because you decided you want physical discs suddenly. Now, one thing I will say about this, however, is that because they've made the system a little smaller in every direction, most notably the thinness of it when you're looking at it in vertical mode, the addition of the disc reader does make for a much more noticeable bump. With the current models, I always thought the digital version did look a little bit better, but the disc bump on the physical one didn't really bother me that much. This one, it's a lot more noticeable. So much so that I'm very curious to see how it's going to look horizontally, because vertically, it's a little bit of an eyesore. But horizontally, maybe it'll be masked the right way or even work out in that corner orientation, which, by the way, is also a little weird to me, because one of the other changes from the current model PlayStation is that with the current models, you have a stand that works for both vertical and horizontal. It adjusts to match which way you want to have your system have it be. With this new model, they are two separate stands, and it's only shipping with one of them, the horizontal one. So it ships with the one that allows the system to be horizontal, but the majority of photos showing this system off is this system being vertical, because that's the way the system is designed to probably look best. And that option, you're going to need to pay $30 separately to buy a vertical stand for it. So that's just a little bit awkward to me. I mean, I guess to be fair, with the PS4, you did have to buy a separate vertical stand as well, but an important distinction there is that the PS4 just worked horizontally. You didn't have to use a stand either way, whereas with this system, you need to buy a vertical stand to have it be vertical. At least that's what PlayStation is saying, while it ships with that horizontal option because it still needs a stand for that to work. Now, aside from the disc reader, there are a couple other changes to the functionality of the system versus the current model. They have upped the number of USB ports as well as rearranged them. We now have 2 USB-C ports in the front and 2 USB-A ports in the back, which I'm a little bothered by, primarily because, look, as someone who reviews a lot of third-party accessories, especially controllers, I can tell you the vast majority of manufacturers right now are selling controllers that come with USB-C to A cables. And now if you want to use those with the system, you have to run it to the back of the PS5 instead of plugging it into the front. I kind of wish it was still the same setup as right now, where you have a CNA on the front, and then if you wanted to up the ports, you could have a CNA on the back as well. It makes more sense to me. I mean, even PlayStation's own DualSense Edge ships with a C to A cable. The Kitsune, which I just recently reviewed, that ships with a C to A cable. There are hardwired controllers where you can't swap the cable out that use C to A as the design. It just seems like a really odd choice to me, and I'm sure some manufacturers are going to adapt and start shipping C to C cables instead. or at least with new products coming out in the future, it just seems like a really awkward change to me personally. Now, one change that is absolutely for the better is that this new model does also ship with higher storage. The current model PlayStation 5s ship with an 825GB SSD internally, whereas these new models are going to come with a full terabyte. So that's a nice little almost 200GB bump that I think is going to be appreciated by anyone who picks these systems up. Now, they didn't talk about the expandable storage in these systems. I can't imagine that that is a feature that's being removed. I am curious how the swap is handled compared to the current systems, because they've also changed the cover setup on these. Instead of being 2 full covers on each side, it's now 4 separate covers with bottom and tops. They showed how you could remove one of the bottom covers to swap in and out the disk drive. I imagine the SSD is going to be a similar situation where one of those top covers or the other side cover come off to reveal where you can install that expandable storage. Speaking of covers, again, these are obviously a completely different setup now being in 4 pieces, and PlayStation has confirmed that they are going to be shipping some new cover options for this model specifically in the future, specifically starting off with a black cover design and then that new metallic series that they recently revealed where you have that metallic red, metallic blue, the kind of silver look. Those are going to be available for this new model very soon, early next year. They haven't talked about any others though. Obviously there are a lot of colors that exist for the current model PS5 that they may or may not bring out for this new one. And what I'm really curious about is what this means for the future of new covers that ship later on. Obviously we've had a couple different special edition designs like the recent Spider-Man one, so I'm curious if they release other special edition covers in the future, are those going to support the current original model PS5s as well? Are they going to make ones for those specifically, or are they just going to go all in on this new approach? It's just an interesting thing that we don't really know until they start releasing more stuff. It's just something that I am definitely very curious about, because one of the things I love about the covers is that it gives you a way to customize your system without having to buy a special edition system all over again. And if moving forward, new special edition designs are restricted to this new to PS5, that actually changes the conversation, and yes, in fact, you do have to buy a whole new PS5 because it's a different cover setup. Again, this new model is shipping at an updated price point where the digital stuff have gone up by $50. The disc version is staying the same, although it does cost you a little more if you buy those separately over time. I know some people are a little put off by this, but honestly, to me, it actually does make sense because we've already seen PlayStation 5s have an international price raise that hasn't affected the US specifically, so bumping up that digital model pricing that also happens to now have greater storage while keeping the top line model with the disc reader the same price, to me seems fine. Sure, cheaper is always better, but this isn't a price increase that I'm particularly outraged about. It's certainly not like when they upped the price of PlayStation Plus. One thing that was not covered by the blog post, and I can understand why it's not necessarily a priority to talk about this yet, but I am very curious about, is whether or not this new model is also going to include support for PlayStation Link. This is a new proprietary wireless communication type that PlayStation announced as part of the PlayStation Portal, which is going to be used in their upcoming new line of headsets as well. I think PlayStation is really interested in this concept of trying to build out a deeper ecosystem that's using a lot more of their own proprietary stuff. And so while you can obviously use their headsets with a dongle on this new system, if it does include that PlayStation Link technology, that means that these new headsets would also support just directly connecting to the system, no dongle required, which I hope is the case. It seems odd to me that they would announce this new communication type and add support for it in the Portal specifically, and then release a new revision of the PS5 later that doesn't have it. I don't know. I just feel like that's going to be something that's going to be announced later or confirmed. It would be very awkward in my mind for them not to include that with this revision. Overall, I think the best word I can use to sum up this revision approach is interesting. There are things about it, again, that I do like. Smaller size, lighter weight, higher internal storage. I actually like the look of the 4-plate setup, which I neglected to mention earlier, actually. They've specified the top plates are a gloss finish, while the bottom plates are a matte finish, something very akin to the very first model PS4, which is something that I kind of dig. I usually prefer matte over gloss, but if you're gonna do gloss, I actually really like when they do that kind of half and half approach instead of an all gloss finish. So I'm very curious to see how that looks in person. Vertical stand sold separately doesn't sit entirely well with me, especially because, again, they really do depict this system primarily in vertical. So if you need a stand either way and the stands are not the same, I feel like it should have shipped with the vertical and then horizontal was an option. But whatever, I guess that's just how we're going to take this approach. I don't love only USB-C on the front. I'm sure there are some people who are going to like that because it's also lower profile and feels a little more up to date. But just considering the ecosystem around the PlayStation right now, I feel like keeping a USB-A port in the front just would make more sense. And visually, I think the updated look for the digital system looks great, while the disc version of the system, which is the route that I would be going because I want to hold on to discs as long as I can on PlayStation, yeah, it's a little bit awkward looking. I'm hoping that maybe that one in horizontal, though, is going to end up working out out better. So that's just a bit of a mental unload of everything we've learned about with this new revision of the PS5. Like I said, there are things about it that we don't fully know just yet. I'm absolutely planning on picking one of these up when they're releasing so we can go over some of those changes compared to the current model system. It looks like moving forward, this is going to be the default baseline moving forward. You cannot get the current gen models once those are all sold out. So this is the current future of PlayStation. If you want to see any of that future coverage, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. If you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button to let me know, and I will see you guys later.